and today we're going to be taking a look at Cardcaptor Sakura, or what most people call it, just Cardcaptors. Now something I will say right now is that I have not watched this show in many years. In fact, I would consider this to be one of the very early animes that I started watching, you know, next to the ones like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Digimon, Sailor Moon, and all that kind of stuff. So I guess you could say this is one of those animes that I do have a lot of nostalgia for, but of course, just because I have nostalgia for something does not mean I'm automatically going to say that it's like the best show ever. So like any of the other reviews that I've done, it's not going to be biased by any means. Even though I really don't think I need to say that every time, but I figured I might as well just say it here because, well, like I said, this is one of those shows I actually grew up watching. So let's talk about the story already. So it begins with our main character, Sakura Kinomoto. Or you can call her Sakura, or whatever the hell else you want to call it. I mean, really, it's the same fucking name, just said differently. And she is a 10-year-old girl who's very energetic and really likes sports but hates math. And she lives with her father, Fujitaka, and her older brother, Toya. Now, in case you're wondering what happened to her mom, well, that's because she passed away before that Sakura even knew her. So everything at school is going all well and good. I mean, she's at the cheer club and all that. And when she gets back home, she hears a noise that comes from the basement, and then she goes and investigates. And the noise was coming from a book that was on the shelf. And it happened to be very bright and colorful with red and gold, and it happens to be called the Cloud Book. And what's inside the book are a bunch of cards called the Cloud Cards. But as soon as she opens it, the cards go flying out like all over the place, and then something emerges from inside the book, and that happens to be the guardian of the cards called Kiro. Well, his real name is Cerberus, but everyone always calls him Kiro for short. So Kiro is supposed to be a giant dog, but because there is no cloud cards inside the book anymore, he's kind of reduced to look like a puppy dog. So he tells her that you are now the card captor because you just let off all the cards out and now you have to bring them all back. Now what the cloud cards really are is that they're all a bunch of cards that have different elements and personalities. So you got your usual like wind, water, fire, or earth. And then you get many different ones such as wood, you get sword, you get shield, you get fight, you get time, you get maze, you get loop. There's quite a lot of different ones out there. Now what I mean by them having personality is that they all have a true form. And usually the way how they go about things is always different. Like I know for an example the flower card is a very happy card, but it ends up starting up havoc because it almost drowns everyone with flower petals. Yeah, that happened. And then as for the shield card, well, it doesn't really hurt anyone at all, it's just trying to protect things that are most precious to them. But by doing so, it was kind of got in the way for the fact that Tomoyo, who is Sakura's best friend, has something that she wanted to open in there, but she couldn't open it because, well, the shield card was protecting it. So usually the cloud cards will usually do things from day-to-day life, whether it be like at schools, at homes, at someone else's place, or at an outing. And the way how she captures them is that she uses one of the cloud cards and uses them as their weakness. And of course using the sealing wand, which is, you know, it seals them into the cards. So before we move on, let's talk a little bit about the characters. So of course you get Tomoyo, like I said, who is Sakura's best friend. And she really enjoys video making, so kinda like me. And she also likes to give Sakura some crazy outfits, mostly because, well, you know, it makes filmmaking much better because she films her whenever she captures some of the cards. Now, Sakura doesn't like the idea of this, but she happens just to do it anyway. And then you got a character named Lee, who is from the Lee clan, and he was from a family of Taoists who are from Hong Kong, but he transferred to Japan so he can capture the rest of the cloud cards. And he can locate them using some board that kind of looks like Chinese checkers. And he even wields a sword, but most of the time he usually likes to shoot lasers out of it. Who does this guy think he is, Link? I mean, he does wear green after all. So at first, him and Sakura are rivals with each other, but eventually they do become closer friends. So just one more character I guess I should talk about is Mei Ling. And she is Lee's cousin, and she is a martial artist. And a lot of the time she's very jealous of Sakura, but she's mostly there to help Lee out. So I guess that's really all I should say about the characters, and as for the story overall, so basically the story is about trying to get all the cards back together into one on one big journey. So in a sense, it is kinda like Dragon Ball Z for the fact that they just have to go around collecting a bunch of things, but in this case you don't see any planets get blown up. And the reason why they had to collect the cards is not just because they make a wish, but to seal them all back so they're not wreaking havoc all over the world. Well, more like all over Japan anyways. But I'm sure if they just left it over for a little while, it probably would eventually get to the point of taking over the world. And also we can just blame Sakura for opening the damn book and just making a big mess everywhere. So yeah, because this show is considered as a magical girl anime, well, yeah, it does kind of have that elements to it, even though she doesn't literally transform, but you know. The outfits are pretty crazy looking enough, so if I say so, yeah, it counts enough. And there is some romance thrown in, mostly because Sakura has a huge crush on her brother's best friend named Yakido. So yeah, I think that covers up the basic of the story, and overall I have to say it's pretty good. Now I do find that the characters are pretty well developed and are pretty likable for the most part. And the whole idea of the show isn't too bad either. So if all nostalgia aside, I still actually kinda like this one. So for now, let's move on to other things, like the animation. And I must say, it looks pretty damn good if I say so myself. Now, it was done by the same people of Clamp, you know, just like Magical Knight Rayearth. And I'm pretty sure you guys already know by now that I really do like a lot of their art styles. And this one, yeah, it still does look really good, but I don't think it looks as good as Magical Knight Rayearth's, but this one is still pretty good nonetheless. So when it comes to animation, I really don't have much big complaints about it, but overall I'd say it's pretty good. And not a whole lot else I can say. So, as for the music, I find that the background music is very good and very suits the theme of the stuff that goes on. And weirdly enough, I actually still remember most of it too. So I don't have much to say about the background music, but I really do think it is pretty good. Now, as for the opening theme song, well, the version that I watched of it was in English, but for some reason it didn't have the intro that I was used to seeing as a kid. Instead, it had the original Japanese one. So it was my first time ever seeing the original intro, and I have to say, it was actually pretty good, and it was very catchy, very upbeat, and it does kind of suit the show too, so that's pretty good. But yet again, I still remember the original English opening of this show, and I have to say, I actually kind of like the English one better, honestly. And as again, it has nothing to do with nostalgia factor. Now, the reason why I really like the English opening better is mostly because not only does it get stuck in your head every now and then, but it kind of has like this really epic motivational feel to it, which I think is really cool. And overall, I just found that the opening theme was just really cool sounding, so I don't know, I just really liked it a lot. Now, don't get me wrong, I like the Japanese opening too, but of course, let's move on to the other stuff, like the voice acting, and oh dear lord, oh man, where do I begin? The voice acting is fucking horrendous. So for one, I barely know who any of these voice actors are. I mean, the only ones I'm actually familiar with is Matt Hill and Brian Drummond, and you know what? Both of them here kinda suck. But I'm not gonna blame all the voice actors here for doing a terrible job. I really think it has to do with the voice director more than anything. But anyways, let's just go over a couple of them. So first you have Sakura, and let me tell ya, her voice is fucking annoying as shit. Now, not only her, but I find that a lot of the other girls in the show sound like total sleazebags, which is not only annoying, but doesn't even suit the characters whatsoever. Especially whenever she yells out at someone's name, she's always like, "Oh, Tomoyo," or "Oh, Yakito." And even Tomoyo's voice is like that too, where I remember one part she's like, "I'm doing this because video making is my passion." Now, clearly, my version of the voices probably won't do it justice, but I think you get the idea that it just gets really annoying very fast. It just sounds awful. Now, the only voice within this entire show that is actually tolerable is the voice of Toya. Only because he at least puts a decent job as acting sarcastic. And as for Kiro, oh god, yeah, he is voiced by Matt Hill, and let me tell ya, terrible job here. I mean, for one, his voice really reminds me of fucking Bubsy, and we all know what we all think of that piece of turd. The only positive thing about it is that at least it's not as bad as Bubsy's voice, but it's still not that much better. So yeah, I think this is pretty clear that this is easily the weakest part of the entire show, at least if you're watching it in English anyway, and yeah, the voice acting is just god fucking awful. Now, I don't know if I would say this is like the absolute worst thing I ever heard, but I would at least put it in like, I don't know, maybe like top 10 or top 20, but still, that's not very good at all. So let's move on from talking about the worst part of it, and let's move on. So if I were to rate this one, I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. I do think that this show does hold up fairly well. Now, yeah, it definitely isn't as amazing as I remember it being, but I still consider it to be a pretty good show nevertheless. Mostly because it has some pretty good characters, a generally good story, a pretty good premise, and I did find it to just be fun enough. Because the funny parts that are in the show are pretty funny for the most part, but it's nothing over the top, so yeah, like I said, it's just a pretty fun enough show. Well, at least for the parts that are trying to be comedy-like. But overall, it is a fairly good, lighthearted show. And it surprisingly holds up quite well, because I'll be honest here, I was a little bit nervous going into this one again, because I really did not want to think this one was gonna suck. Well, the only thing that did suck was the voice acting, and let me tell you, man, when I first watched the show originally, I don't remember it sounding that bad at all. But then again, I was a kid, and that was not really the kind of things I was focusing on. So pretty much the same reason why I actually still find that Sailor Moon is a pretty decent show, although I actually prefer this one over Sailor Moon personally. So the last few things I have to say about Cardcaptors is that I found the show to be held up pretty well. Just avoid the English dub because, well, you know, I just think it's just fucking awful. But then again, there are some people that do like it, and hey, if you happen to be one of those people, then hey, give out your reasons for liking it, because I'm curious. And of course, don't be afraid for me thinking that I'm gonna judge you on it, because really, you have an opinion yourself too, you know. So if you also happen to like this show as a kid, then maybe revisiting it isn't going to be a terrible idea. At least for me it worked fine. And also one last thing I will have to say is that Cardcaptor's a mystic adventure, Cardcaptor's a quest of all time, and yeah, now I'm gonna shut the fuck up.